What's up, boys? Welcome to a very special episode of The Extra Point with me, your host, Phil Ruskin. Super excited to be here. I got a special draft recap and then season-long preview for Sunday Funday. It is our oldest league. It is our keeper league. I don't know. It's got to be going on 20-something years now at this point. So it was a great draft last night. Obviously, we always do the draft the Wednesday night before Thursday night football, so the guys are excited about their teams, and then we can start putting points into the lineup. So without further ado, I'm going to bring up the board here in just a second and go through the draft recap as well as kind of where I see the season-long preview. Right now, I'm looking at 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. Looking at 6 teams realistically that I think can get the top 4 spots, with a 7th that's kind of teetering on the edge. And then obviously at the end of the show, I will reveal who I believe will be the top 4 playoff teams. Everything that I say in this video presumes full health. Obviously, you drafted your team to be healthy. And then obviously nothing is personal. So if I don't think you're a playoff team, it doesn't mean I don't like you. It's just not, your team's just not my favorite team compared to the rest of the group. So let's bring up the board here so you guys can go ahead and see it. And I'm just going to start here and go in order. Let's start with Stanley's team here. Stantuan at the 101. Look, I like what Stan did. Drafting from the 101's hard. You've got 22 picks in between, your first and second pick. That's never easy to have that many players going off the board. It's actually more players going off the board because it's a keeper league. So there's guys that should be in that range that aren't. But let's start at the top. Stanley's got Jalen Hurts and Kyler Murray. It's got to be the best quarterback room in the league. Obviously, ceiling performance from Jalen Hurts. He's one of 4 players that I believe is capable of being the overall QB1. And Kyler Murray should never have gotten to the 11th round. I'm thankful Stanley finally took him. But what a great value. I generally don't like having 2 quarterbacks on my team in a single quarterback league. My preferred roster construction is 1 quarterback, 1 tight end, 1 defense, and then fill the rest up with your running backs and wide receivers. But the value is just too good in the 11th round to not take Kyler Murray. So I like it. Let's talk about running backs here. He's got Christian McCaffrey, obviously has been the overall RB1, certainly can continue to be the RB1 in San Francisco. So he's got ceiling performance. And then he's really looking at DeAndre Swift, Devin Singletary, and Rico Dowdle to kind of fill in his RB2 spot. When you have someone like CMC, who's just a plug and play weekly start, kind of set it and forget it player, we call that a hero RB build. So Stanley definitely has a hero RB build. And the reason I like this team is because he had that great start with CMC, and then he didn't take another running back until the 5th. So he went Evans, Kupp, and Flowers. I love Cooper Kupp this season. I think he's just as good, if not a better value than Puka Nacua. Mike Evans, for one last ride, you can put 1,000 yards basically safely into the bank account. And then if he gets 7 touchdowns or plus, I think it's another great season for Mike Evans. Zay Flowers is the wide receiver 1 on his team, but he's the second best pass catching option. Mark Andrews is technically the number 1 quote unquote wide receiver on that team, but Flowers has no competition. So for your wide receiver 3, I like it. I love the upside of Christian Kirk and Brian Thomas. I don't know that Stan needs both guys in Jacksonville. It'll be a bit of a challenge for him to figure out maybe who he wants to play on a weekly basis. And the running back room's a little thin. So I could see Stanley potentially making a move for a running back and putting Christian Kirk or Brian Thomas up for sale. And then Romeo Doubs, the Packers are a challenge because they just have so many pass catching options. So the weeks that it's Dobbs' week, you're going to love that. The weeks that it's not, he's going to hurt you. But, with the way that Stanley's team is set up here, Romeo Doubs is really just more like a bye week fill-in player and maybe has some flex appeal, if and when Christian Watson gets injured or anyone else on the team. So I like it. The Dolphins defense, I don't rate the Dolphins defense. It's fine. I'm always a big fan of streaming defenses, so not the end of the world there. And then obviously Sam Laporta at the tight end position, coming off of last year's overall tight end 1 season. I don't see him repeating as the overall tight end one, but I think he is about as safe as it gets to finish inside the top 5. He could be the overall tight end one again. I just think there's enough weapons in Detroit that his touchdowns will not be double digits again, and that's what pushed him to that top spot last year. But he's as safe as it gets, a weekly plug-and-play tight end and a true difference maker at the position. So great draft, Stan. I'm not going to go through and break down everybody's. Here's what I would have done differently, or here's where you maybe could have, pivoted and made this pick instead of that pick. If you guys want me to do that, just DM me or just shoot me a text. I'm happy to put together just a kind of a short video just specifically for you. We could do that with every team, but I want obviously to kind of go through the teams tonight as just an overall league. I do see Stanley as a top 6 team. I have him projected in that top 6 right now. And obviously at the end of the show, I will reveal if I believe he is in my top 4 and capable of the playoffs. Tony had the 102. Tony was online and drafting while he was at Run Club. So, congrats, Tony. Hope you got a nice 5K in and got the heart rate going. Really easy decision at the 102. It's Tyreek Hill. I think you maybe could have looked at CeeDee Lamb a little bit, but I think Tyreek for me is the higher upside player. And then an interesting kind of decision there with Derrick Henry at the 209 and Josh Allen at the 302. I think those are his 3 ceiling guys, and then there's just not a lot of ceiling in this team. So let's kind of talk at the top. Josh Allen obviously has been the QB1, QB2, QB1, and QB1 the last 4 years. I have zero reason to think Josh Allen is not capable of being the overall QB1 again. I certainly think he's about as safe as it gets every week at the quarterback position. And then you have Caleb Williams, the rookie, who obviously Tony, Bears fan and the excitement around Chicago. Again, I'm not a big fan of taking 2 quarterbacks in a draft, but it's fine. I think when you have someone like Josh Allen, I wouldn't have taken Caleb Williams because you're never going to play Caleb Williams over Josh Allen. So Caleb Williams, in my opinion, while he's a great player in single quarterback, he's just clogging a roster spot. Sure, it's nice to have him if Josh Allen gets injured, but if Josh Allen gets injured, your season's taken a big dip anyway. Caleb can't replace what Josh Allen can, even though we expect him to be really great. So it's just I would maybe look to make a move there, as the season progresses. At the running back position, Derrick Henry. Obviously, we love Derrick Henry. He's been the Yeti. He's been King Henry for a reason. I'm really interested to see how the game goes in a couple hours here tonight as our first kind of answer to the question of what is his volume going to be. It's not going to be Tennessee where he gets everything. I do think Derrick Henry has a good season, not a great season. I think he's very touchdown dependent. I absolutely see double-digit rushing touchdowns in his range of outcomes. So I love the touchdown upside. He's certainly the running back 1 on this roster. So it's pretty easy for Tony to just go ahead and plug him in each week and then kind of figure out what he wants to do at RB2. Alvin Kamara has always been a pass catcher and not a great rusher. That's his value. Ryan Ramczyk is the offensive tackle, the best offensive tackle on the Saints. He is out for the season. They have a new coordinator with Clint Kubiak. So there's reason for optimism in New Orleans, and then there's reason for some skepticism. I'm personally out on Kamara. And Najee Harris obviously is in a timeshare. I think Jalen Warren's the better player, and Brian Robinson's in a timeshare. I think Austin Eckler has the better value. So I think that Derrick Henry is the easy kind of plug and play in this running back room, and then it's kind of pick your best matchup for Tony to stream, this position here for the second running back. At the wide receiver, we talked about it at the top. Tyreek Hill, wide receiver 1, certainly can be the overall wide receiver 1 and is someone that's really only one of 2 guys I think capable of breaking the 2,000-yard mark. So that one's easy. Rashee Rice is the wide receiver 2. As of right now, there is no suspension. We don't anticipate that's going to happen. And so I think that's a nice player to have. Obviously, anybody attached to Patrick Mahomes has great upside. And then you look at the rest of the wide receiver room, and it's thin. It's really thin. Keenan Allen is coming into camp injured. He's apparently overweight. He is in a crowded room with a rookie quarterback. DeAndre Hopkins was supposed to be out 4 to 6 weeks. There's question marks if he's going to play week 1. He's old in a crowded wide receiver room. And then you've got Josh Palmer, who I think actually could be the wide receiver 1 in Los Angeles. It remains to be seen what his usage is going to be and what their scheme's going to be. But they're not very good, the Chargers. They're going to have to throw the ball because their offensive line's just kind of average, and they They have no wide receivers. They don't have an alpha. So I actually think people who are down on Herbert might be wrong. I think they're going to have to throw the ball to catch up, and I think that benefits Ladd McConkey and Josh Palmer and some of the running backs. And then Mike Williams, to me, is Mike Williams. He's going to play 4 games, and the 4 games that he plays, he's going to be great, and then he's going to sit on the bench or on the injured reserve list the rest of the season. So just not a player that I favor given his history. When he's great, but he can really burn you. And then you got George Kittle and Dalton Schultz here. Again, I only like having one tight end. You don't need two. George Kittle is a little bit frail, so there are times, obviously, when he could disappear. But to me, Kittle and Schultz, Kittle has the higher ceiling. He's on the better team and the better offense, but it's crowded in San Francisco. And when it's Debo's week, Kittle suffers. When it's Ayuk's week, Kittle suffers. When it's Kittle's week, he wins you the week, and then the receivers suffer. But I just think it's hard to predict which week it's going to be Schultz and Kittle, because Schultz is in a very similar situation. We love the wide receivers in Houston, and Joe Mixon's there as well. So Schultz is probably like the 5th pass catching option. So overall, I really like the top 3 picks here: Tyreek Hill, Derrick Henry, and Josh Allen. I don't really like the rest of the roster construction, and I don't see a top 6. Tony's not in my top 6. I don't see this as a playoff roster today. McKinnis, obviously our champion. So fantastic. Congrats on your championship last year and getting yourself a ring. I think the challenge for McKinnis, he was behind the 8 ball from the start because he traded picks last year. So no 1st round pick, no 3rd round pick. Those went to Luke. But look, you kept Breece Hall, who is a 1st round pick, and you got him in the 2nd. So that's a big win for McKinnis here. And then Devonta Smith at the 408 to me is an absolute steal. I think that's a fantastic player to be able to pick there. So let's start at the top here with the quarterbacks. I'll be transparent. I didn't understand. Again, I only really think you need one quarterback on a 1 quarterback team. You can stream the position. There'll be guys on the waiver wire. I didn't understand the Aaron Rodgers pick. When you have CJ Stroud, you're never going to play Rodgers over Stroud. You've got 12 to 14 weeks with these guys to figure out when their bye weeks are. And I just don't see a ceiling for Rodgers like there is for Stroud. I expect CJ Stroud to finish as a top 10 quarterback in the QB1 conversation. I think he's your weekly starter. So I think it's possible for McKinnis. He only has 3 receivers on this team. I know he picked up a couple guys on the waiver wire, but it is a 3 receiver league. You have to start 3 receivers. So I would expect him to drop Aaron Rodgers and go and grab another receiver. At the running back position, Breece Hall is one of 6 players who I believe capable of finishing as the overall RB1. Christian McCaffrey, Breece Hall, Bijan Robinson, Jahmyr Gibbs, Saquon Barkley, and Jonathan Taylor. Those are the only 6 that I think realistically can be the overall RB1. Of course, injuries happen. We know that the situation's changed. It may not be that those 6 guys are the top guys. Somebody could emerge. That always happens. But as we go into a season with our projections, with what we know from historical data, that's how I see it. And then after Breece Hall, you've got a hero RB. So Breece Hall obviously is your RB1. Aaron Jones is the guy for now in Minnesota. I really like the upside of Ty Chandler this season. I think the downside for Aaron Jones is he's old. He has a horrible injury history. And Ty Chandler won the job last year from Alexander Mattison. So he has the trust of Kevin O'Connell. You've got Sam Darnold, who's not great, obviously. So I think they'll lean a little heavier on the running game, which benefits Jones, but hurts him because it puts him in a position where he's just going to take more damage to his body. So Breece Hall for sure. And then I think it's Aaron Jones. And then I like Austin Eckler. I think Austin Eckler is the better value than Brian Robinson. I think he went around earlier, which was a little surprising, but it's a half PPR format. Brian Robinson's not a great pass catcher. That is exactly how Austin Eckler has made his living, is being a pass catcher. And to me, what's really important about Austin Eckler is his run game coordinator and co-offensive coordinator was his former head coach for the Los Angeles Chargers. So that was a pretty easy kind of, when the Chargers were getting ready to release him, we had a good feeling that Washington could be a landing spot for Eckler. We like Cliff Kingsbury's offense. He does like to throw the ball a ton to the running back. So I like the value there of Eckler. I wouldn't be shocked to see Eckler complement Breece Hall in this lineup as the RB2. And then Blake Corum and J.K. Dobbins. I think people that were afraid that Blake Corum was going to come in and take a bunch of work away from Kyren Williams can pretty safely put those fears to rest. Sean McVay historically has featured one running back, so Corum is a backup. He will remain a backup unless Kyron misses time. And I am personally out on J.K. Dobbins with all the surgeries to his knees and then the Achilles injury. I just don't want any part of J.K. Dobbins, and I am okay being wrong. If J.K. Dobbins does well, and I hope he does well, I'm happy to say that I was wrong, but I don't want to take a shot on him. I have drafted him nowhere. I don't believe it's going to work out for him, and it's just the injuries that's the massive injuries that scare me off. At the wide receiver position, Devonta Smith has been a wide receiver one in his career with A.J. Brown being supported by Jalen Hurts. Kellen Moore is the new offensive coordinator there. The Eagles, we expect them to throw it at a much higher clip than they have. So I love Devonta Smith. Garrett Wilson, everyone is expecting to be a wide receiver one to finish in the top 10. I love that McKinnis got to keep him in the 6th because he's being drafted in true redraft at the end of the first round. That upsets me a little bit because you're drafting a player at his ceiling for a player who has never done it. And that scares me off just a little bit. But in the 6th round, give me Garrett Wilson all day. I do see it. I can see a path for him to finish as a wide receiver one. There's not much else there in New York from pass catching options other than Brees. But again, McKinnis has Brees. So the question is going to be is, if one of them gets the touchdown, then the other suffers a little bit. And then Jaden Reed, I really like. I think he is the 1A/1B in Green Bay. But again, with Green Bay, there's so many wide receivers. There's so many different players out there right now. It's hard for me to project which of them is going to have the week and score. So it's just really thin. Cole Kmet, Taysom Hill at the tight end position. Taysom Hill can get you 30 points in a week. He can get you a legitimate 0. So it's very, very scary of how you're going to play him. And then Cole Kmet, unfortunately, as much as I like the player, you've got 3 really solid wide receiving options there with Caleb. I think he's the 4th receiving option there, barring injury. So I don't have McKinnis in my top 6, and I don't project a playoff appearance for him this season. Let's move to the 104 with Colin. This was a really interesting turning point in the draft, the 104. And you can say, Phil, how could the 4th pick be a huge turning point in the draft? I'll get to that in a little bit, but I think picking Justin Jefferson here is a good pick. I'm always going to bet on talent. So I think the people that were nervous about, well, it's Sam Darnold or it could be J.J. McCarthy. Obviously, when McCarthy went down for the year with the meniscus, we understood that it was going to be Darnold for the remainder of the season unless he gets injured. And I think what you're going to see is Justin Jefferson is going to bring Sam Darnold along, meaning that he doesn't have to have superior quarterback play from Sam Darnold in order to still finish as a wide receiver one. I very safely have Justin Jefferson in the top 10 just because of the volume and the talent there. And I think he probably finishes wide receiver 8, 9, 10. I don't think he can get into the top 7 or higher this year. Again, everything presumes health. The ceilings for the other receivers are just higher, but it's about as safe a pick as it gets. So I love the start there. Let's start with quarterback here at the top. Lamar Jackson, easy pick, 4th round pick. I don't love taking early round quarterbacks, but I think the 4th round for Jackson is probably a fair price. And then obviously he was coming off of an MVP season where he finishes the overall QB4 last year. They added Derrick Henry. They didn't really add any pass catchers. So I think you probably get a fairly decently comped season this year to what Lamar Jackson did last year. So easy for me to say he finishes in the top 10. I think he definitely finishes. Not definitely. I think he should easily finish in the top 5 as well. So love Lamar Jackson in the ceiling there. Obviously, we talked about Justin Jefferson. I really like this wide receiver room. Justin Jefferson, Chris Olave, Devontae Adams. You've got 3 guys who are the wide receiver ones on their own team. So great wide receiver room there for Colin. And then you've got, Jordan Addison, Cortland Sutton, Christian Watson. I want to just say really quickly, Jordan Addison and Justin Jefferson on the same team is challenging. I don't love that. I could see possibly Colin maybe making a trade for Addison off the team to bring someone else in, another receiver or another running back. Cortland Sutton, look, he's the only show in town. I don't project the Broncos to be anything but a bottom 10 offense. Got a rookie quarterback with Bo Nix. They're not a great team. Their divisions, you're going to lose to the Chiefs twice. But he's the only guy. So he should get a huge market share. He should get a ton of volume. And if the touchdowns go his way, there are certainly weeks that I could see Collins using Cortland Sutton in the flex. And Christian Watson, to me, when he's healthy, he is the wide receiver one for the Packers. He's built differently than all the other guys are. He's the touchdown threat. He's got the best, he's the X receiver. He's got the best top end speed. Problem with Christian Watson is his availability, right? They always say the best ability is availability, and his availability, it's not always there. So when he's there, he's great. I think it's just making sure that he's there. And then for me, I think I love the offense. I love Jordan Love. I love the Packers. I see him as a guy that you could easily flex and even start in your wide receiving room as well. So love the pick. Great keeper in the 14th round. The running back room is interesting. You have some guys that are in committees, and then you don't have any ceiling, and that to me is the challenge here. Kenneth Walker III has never finished as an RB1. I don't project him to be an RB1 again this season. I project him in that like 12 to 14 range. So still a very usable RB2. He's still going to be a great player. He's going to get touchdowns. There's just not enough ceiling there for me. Tony Pollard and Tajay Spears, having both is tough. I don't know who you play. Spears is the better value. I think Spears by the second half of the year is going to be the starter and Pollard's going to be the backup. I think that's how a lot of people see it and project it. It's the Ryan Carthon loves Tajay Spears. The tape on Spears is better than Pollard. What we saw from Tony Pollard in a bell cow row in Dallas last year was atrocious, absolutely atrocious, and Dallas dumped him for that reason. So it'll be difficult to kind of project which of those guys you play on a weekly basis. Ezekiel Elliott, as of right now, is being talked about as the backup in a committee to Rico Dowdle. Either way, it's a committee, and Dallas's running back room is one of the worst in the actual NFL. It is a complete mess. I don't want anything to do with it. So it's just difficult for me to see Ezekiel Elliott being anything close to what he ever was. If you watched him last year play, he ran at one of the worst clips for yards per carry. And to me, I don't see a world where he comes back a year older and improves. At the tight end position, look, you got Mark Andrews. You have a difference maker. I have Mark Andrews projected to be the overall tight end one right now. He's number one in my rankings going into the season. And you have the stack with Lamar Jackson. So in a way, Mark Andrews is the wide receiver 4 on this team, which is phenomenal. And then a sneaky pick from Colin, which I really like. Put TJ Hawkinson on IR. He will not be back in week 5. He's probably more like 6 to 8 weeks away from actually playing, but great player when he does come back in that offense. We like it. And then I just want to briefly mention Nick Chubb. Nick Chubb is a name. He's approaching 30 years old. He's coming off of a really devastating injury. He's not even a year removed from the injury and the surgery. Nick Chubb is on IR for the first 4 weeks, so that's fine. You can throw him on your IR. But everything I've read, everyone I've talked to, and everything that I've heard says Nick Chubb is really more like week 10 is when he should be back. He's going to miss at least half the season. Cleveland has Jerome Ford, who I absolutely love this year. And you've seen Nick Chubb with Kareem Hunt in the past. They can both coexist. So even if Chubb comes back, Jerome Ford's not going away. Cleveland has a week 10 bye. I really think that it could be week 11 before Nick Chubb shows up again. So it doesn't cost you anything because you just keep him on your IR. But if you're, I just don't think you're getting the Nick Chubb of old. I don't see that in his ceiling outcomes. So this wide receiver room with this quarterback and tight end, I do have Colin as a top 16. And so, like I said, we'll wait at the end of the show to see if he's in my playoffs. Let's move to the middle of the draft with Greg. Let's start with the quarterbacks, Dak Prescott and Kirk Cousins. Dak Prescott and Kirk Cousins both are pocket passers, so not a ton of rushing upside, and that's okay. Dak finished as the QB3 last year, and Kirk Cousins was a QB1 every week except for 1 week before the injury last season. So 2 really solid pocket passers. With Dak and with Cousins, what you get is low ceiling, high floor. So you're really safe. You're never going to have a week where they really burn you, but you're just not going to get week winning upside like you would get from some of the rushing quarterbacks. And that's okay. I think in this team, Greg's got some really nice pieces that I like. So let's transition to the wide receiver room, starting at the top with Amon-Ra St. Brown. I think Amon-Ra is capable of being the overall wide receiver 1. So I have him in the 6 players that I think can be there. I don't see that actually happening. We love Jahmyr Gibbs. We love Montgomery. We love Jamison Williams and Sam Laporta. So I just think there's enough mouths to feed in Detroit where the touchdowns may just not go his way for the life of a season. And I think that's what's going to prevent him from being the overall wide receiver one, but he's going to finish in the top 10. He should finish in the top 5. And it's an easy, safe every single week. Put him in your lineup and you're just so happy that you have him. It's a great pick at the 105. DJ Moore is the alpha in Chicago. He has been paid like that. He is running with the ones. If anything, I see DJ Moore's role as very secure. I think Keenan Allen and Rome Odunze will battle for the second wide receiver in 2 wide receiver sets. Obviously, all 3 will be on the field when they go 3 wide. I think it'll be Keenan to start the year, but I do see Odunze overtaking him. But DJ Moore, for me, very, very safe and a great player to have as your wide receiver 2. Last year was his first ever wide receiver 1 season. So certainly has the ability to finish inside the top 10. And then Jackson Smith-Njigba is interesting because everybody, he was the number 1 drafted wide receiver last year in the NFL draft. It didn't work out for him. It wasn't a good rookie season. Geno was injured. JSN wasn't good. Tyler Lockett's still there. Tyler Lockett extended his contract. He's practicing this week. He's healthy. So I know everyone's expecting the breakout for JSN, and I see both sides of it. I see a path where he could overtake Lockett. I see a path where Lockett retains his role for another season, and JSN is just kind of that third option. The challenge with JSN is he is the Tyler Lockett comp. Neither one of those guys are replacing DK Metcalf. So in 2 wide receiver sets, similar to Keenan Allen, Rome Odunze, you might see JSN on the bench and 2 wide receivers. Obviously, in 3, he'll be there. Dontavian Wicks is a great dart throw. I love him in DFS. I love him in best ball. It's hard for me to project a lot of volume for him, given that he's the 4th receiving option in that team. And then Hollywood Brown, obviously on IR to start the season with the injury to the chest. I think he'll come back in a couple weeks, but we'll see, what his injury looks like moving forward. Greg's strength is his running back room. I know you see Isaiah Pacheco on the screen. He actually has Jonathan Taylor. Jonathan Taylor was his keeper. So his running back room is Jonathan Taylor, Josh Jacobs, Kyron Williams, Zamir White, and Chase Brown. JT is one of the 6 players that can finish as the overall RB1. We have seen him do it. And I think he's going to have a great season this year in Indianapolis. So I love him as the hero RB. I talked to Greg about this last night after the draft. I would not have taken Josh Jacobs there if my keepers were JT, Kyron, and Zamir White. I would have felt very comfortable. I have 2 running backs with a third guy I can easily plug in on a weekly basis. So I would have taken a wide receiver over Josh Jacobs. But Josh Jacobs, the upside for Jacobs is quite simple. Marshawn Lloyd, who I absolutely love, has a hamstring injury. Emmanuel Wilson is just another guy. And AJ Dillon is already on IR for the season. And Jordan Love doesn't really run. Like he can scramble, but we wouldn't consider him a rushing quarterback. I think Josh Jacobs is going to get every single carry they can give him. I think he's going to get the goal line work. I like Josh Jacobs' outlook this season. I know he came off an atrocious year last year in Vegas, but to me, I don't know that it fits this build. I think a receiver would have helped Greg better in that position, especially in the second round. But having a running back room like this, when the injuries start piling up, Greg's going to be really safe. Kyron Williams is Sean McVay's guy. Sean McVay historically likes to have one running back. We saw that with Todd Gurley. He doesn't really want to have a committee. I think Blake Corum will give Kyron Williams a breather every now and again. He might steal a touchdown or 2 from him, but it's Kyron's job until it's not. And Zamir White's interesting because he had a great last 5 weeks of the season last year. The question is it sustainable? Can he hold that over the life of a season? I think he probably finishes in the mid to low end RB2 spot. That's what you're asking for from a player like that who you're keeping in the 11th round. And Chase Brown's in a timeshare with Zach Moss, but as your 5th running back, I think that's totally fine. I do have Greg in my top 6. Oh, sorry, I forgot Evan Ingram. Evan Ingram to me is really interesting because he's coming off of a tight end 2 seasons. So can he repeat that? They lost Calvin Ridley and they replaced him with Gabe Davis. That is a massive downgrade for Trevor Lawrence. But you've added Brian Thomas Jr. and you have a healthy Christian Kirk. So Ingram to me is a solid tight end. I think he finishes inside the top 10 at the position easily. I don't know if he finishes as high as tight end 2 again this year. I think you'll see some touchdown regression and maybe some yardage regression, but I think he's still a really solid tight end, especially in the 6th round. It's a nice value. So I have Greg in the top 6 right now currently as we start week 1. Let's move to Phil's team. So I started with a hero RB, Bijan Robinson at the 106. Bijan is one of the players who can finish as the overall RB1. And then the value, of course, of AJ Brown falling was a little surprising and kind of shocking. Actually, he shouldn't have fallen out of the 1st round, let alone the middle of the 2nd. So that was a blessing and a gift. AJ Brown can finish as the overall wide receiver 1 in that offense. So that is a great start for this wide receiver room. And then you've got Deebo Samuel, T. Higgins, Tank Dell, Puka Nacua, and Ladd McConkey. Deebo, like any of the 49ers, when it's their week, they can win you the week. When it's not their week, there's some volatility. And so that's okay. I'm okay living with the volatility of Deebo because I know what he gives me, on the upside. The downside is I've got some other guys that I can either play over him or I'll just put him in my wide receiver 3 spot and live with the volatility. Tank Dell, I think, is the 1B in Houston. I think Nico Collins is the 1A, Tank Dell is the 1B, and Steph Diggs is the clear wide receiver 3 there. Everybody knows that Tank Dell and CJ Stroud have an incredible friendship. They just love working together. Tank looked great in preseason with CJ, so I think a really good season for Tank Dell lays in his future. And I'm really in on T. Higgins this season. Jamar Chase might play this week. He might not. Who the heck knows? He's going to be fine. But T. Higgins is playing for a contract somewhere. I don't think that contract's going to be in Cincinnati. I do think he's going to I think someone else is going to pay him. He's a guy who could be a wide receiver 1 for another team. So I like Higgins. We love Joe Burrow. We love that offense. We know what they're capable of. So Higgins, another good player here in the 4th round. Puka Nacua in the 10th, obviously a keeper. So going as a 1st round pick in the 10th round is great value there for Phil's team. I see a little bit of regression for Puka. I think realistically, it's possible we may have seen his best statistical season last year of his whole career. I mean, he broke every record in the book. So the questions that I have is how does it get better? Stafford's getting older. I think this is probably his last season in the league. And if it's not next year, it almost assuredly is. But for one more season, what we love about the Rams is quite simply their defense is atrocious. Aaron Donald, 99, retired. They lost a couple of other pieces in free agency. They didn't really bring in anybody that's a big name, but their offense is fantastic. And that's what you want in fantasy. You want an offense that can score points in bunches with an atrocious defense. So they've got to keep scoring and scoring. So I see a world where Cooper Kupp finishes ahead of Puka. I see a world where Puka finishes ahead of Cooper Kupp. I think both are going to be solidly in the wide receiver 2. One of them is going to finish as a wide receiver 1. But I like the Rams offense a lot going forward this season. I think good season for Puka and good season for Cooper Kupp. Ladd McConkey was a dart throw. Let's figure out who the actual real wide receiver 1 in Los Angeles is. Right now it projects to be Josh Palmer. But Ladd McConkey is going to inherit the Keenan Allen role. He's going to be super safe. He's going to move the chains. He's going to get first downs. He's a slot guy. He's not going to, be going big hits across the middle. He should be able to settle down in zone coverage and just kind of be a safety valve for Justin Herbert. The Chargers have no tight ends. I mean, their tight end room is basically there to block. So I kind of see McConkey. His size is obviously not of a tight end, but I think his role is similar of just get 7 yards each catch, just move the chains and get us a first down. And I think there's going to be a lot of volume there. And that's what you're looking for in fantasy is volume. I broke my own rule. I knew I did it. I didn't want to do it. The value was just too good. I took Anthony Richardson as my quarterback 1 in the 7th round. And I took Jaden Daniels in the 13th. I don't like having 2 quarterbacks, but there is some risk with Richardson. The ceiling is that he can be the overall QB1. That's the ceiling. Josh Allen, Patrick Mahomes, Anthony Richardson, and Jalen Hurts. Those are the 4 guys realistically because of the rushing upside that can do it. And then Mahomes because we've seen him do it before. The floor, though, is pretty low for Richardson. And it's not because of the injury last year. It's because he's still young. We have a small sample size, and we're just not sure excuse me, what his season is really going to look like. So I broke my own rule on purpose because the rushing upside of Jaden Daniels is off the charts. I think he's going to have a fantastic year. He is one of the very, very close to Caleb Williams favorites for offensive rookie of the year. And in the 13th round, it's basically free. It's a shame we're blowing the keeper league up because that would be a fantastic keeper for next year. But again, broke my own rule, but really like the fact that if anything happens to Richardson, I've got Daniels right there to play. So looking at the at the tight end position, Dalton Kincaid kind of rounding out the team. I miss my own running backs. That's why I hate doing my own team. Bijan is the anchor running back, hero RB build, and then kind of using the bench to see who the RB2 is. James Conner is the starter until he's not. I love the touchdown upside there. A healthy Kyler Murray, a field stretcher, a true difference maker with Marvin Harrison Jr. Trey McBride, who I absolutely love this season, about as safe as it gets, one of my favorite tight ends to have. And then Michael Wilson, who I think is going to be useful this year. So James Conner is still the starter. Trey Benson is there, but Conner should get the goal line work. And then Javonte Williams is a really interesting player. You know, he's year 2 off the ACL. Yeah, generally that's when players actually have an uptick in production. Year 1 off the ACL is not usually their best, most productive season. Breece Hall broke that model last year in his first year off the ACL, but Bo Nix is a rookie. There's not a lot of great wide receivers. In fact, there are no great wide receivers in Denver. And so I do see a path where they're going to lean on the running game pretty heavily. So Javonte Williams, Jaleel McLaughlin, I like those two players a lot in Denver this season. Gus Edwards in Los Angeles. Gus Edwards scored 13 rushing touchdowns last season. 13 in the exact same offense in Baltimore with the exact same coordinator in Greg Roman. He is the goal line guy. I already told you in this video, I don't believe in J.K. Dobbins. So Gus Edwards is not going to have a huge yardage season, but his touchdown upside is really, really high. And I do see a path for him to double-digit touchdowns again. So that's why I grabbed him there in the 9th. And then Rachaad White is probably going to take a little bit of a step back this season. Dave Canales is in Carolina as the head coach now, so a new offensive coordinator in Tampa. I like Bucky Irving. I think he's going to be useful. He's going to catch some passes. I think he's going to take a little bit of pass catching work away from White, but not enough to really, to devalue White so much so that you wouldn't want him. But Rachaad White is going to get a lot of volume. And to me, that's what I'm looking for in that kind of a player. And then I broke my own rule as well. A second rule I broke. I don't take players that are on the injured reserve, but I had an extra pick. And so this was a way for me to not have to drop someone. And Jonathan Brooks in the 14th round was an absolute fucking steal. He is going to be the RB1 in Carolina when he comes back. He is much, much closer than a Nick Chubb or a TJ Hawkinson to actually returning. He's a rookie. Carolina's not great, but the volume should be there. Chuba Hubbard was not great last year in a reserve role, and Miles Sanders is basically irrelevant at this point. What I like about Jonathan Brooks and Dave Canales being the head coach is Canales historically has featured one guy and likes to give him a ton of work, hence the volume you saw for Rachaad White last season. I don't think Brooks is a plug-and-play guy in week 5 if he does come off the pup right there in week 5. But over the back half of the season, week 8 through 15, that's where his real value is going to come into play, and that's where you're going to see a difference maker. I mentioned Kincaid early, so we'll finish up. I do have my team in the top 6 right now, currently, as it stands today. Rudy Rudiger made a trade with Luke, so elected to go and grab a second and an extra 3rd round pick in exchange for his first, 12th, and 13th, giving Luke a 3rd first round pick. Rudy's team is, let's start with Jordan Love. I had Jordan Love on my show last 3 weeks ago, whenever it was that I did the league winners episode. I had Jordan Love as one of my quarterbacks that's a league winner. I think Jordan Love's fantastic, and he's going to have a great season. I love the weapons in Green Bay. We love that offense. Green Bay is a sneaky Super Bowl pick for me. That doesn't matter for fantasy. It just, what I'm trying to illustrate is that I think the team's really fucking good. So to me, it's really nice to have a player that, of all the players in Green Bay that you want Jordan Love, because you don't know which receiver it's going to be each week, but Love's going to touch the ball every single play. And that's what you're after. He's going to get all the yards, even if it's Jaden Reed's week 1 week and Christian Watson's next week. All those yards count for Love. So absolutely love the Jordan Love keeper pick there for Rudy. And in the 10th round, what a tremendous value. At the running back spot, it's interesting because I projected Rudy to take one of the big hero RBs in the first round. I would have thought he would have, had he stayed in that round, taken Gibbs or maybe Barkley if he felt comfortable there. But I like Travis Etienne. Travis Etienne finished as the overall RB3 last season. I don't think he finishes that high again. But I did mention earlier that I'm not super stoked on the fact that they replaced Calvin Ridley with Gabe Davis, and Etienne catches passes. So I could see a world where I think he still finishes inside the top 10. I could see a world where he finishes in the top 5. I do think a lot of those targets are going to get distributed to Brian Thomas, Christian Kirk, and Evan Ingram. So we'll see what Etienne's, pass catching upside is, but I don't buy the coach speak where Tank Bigsby is going to take a ton of work away. It's just the talent of Etienne's too great. So I like Etienne. He's just outside. He's my RB7. He's just outside that big six that I keep speaking about. And I like him. I think he's going to have a good season. I think he's going to be a fine RB1 for Rudy on a weekly basis. And then the RB2 is where it gets interesting because Joe Mixon has been the only running back in the NFL to finish as an RB1 the last 3 seasons in a row. I don't think that happens again this year. I don't think he finishes inside the top 10. And I don't say that because I don't think Mixon is capable of it. I just think the wide receivers in Houston are too damn good. CJ Stroud doesn't run. Joe Mixon, he does catch some passes, but you've got Dalton Schultz and then obviously Collins, Dell, and Diggs. The question for me is how much volume is going to be left over for Mixon. Whereas last year in Cincinnati, Jamar Chase missed time, T. Higgins missed time, Joe Burrow, of course, missed the second half of the season. So a lot of that volume flowed all the way through Mixon because of the lack of players available, but also the extra targets that were available. He got a lot of that, and then they shipped him out of town. So to me, it's a question of like, is he really still that guy? Houston paid him like he is. So from a dynasty perspective, I think you got Mixon for another 2-3 years. You're okay with it. So I just don't know what the ceiling is. I think it's probably an RB2 ceiling. Ramondre Stevenson is the only player in New England I'm comfortable with. I'll be transparent about that. I think he's going to get all the volume he can get. Antonio Gibson catches passes. He could be useful. He hasn't been relevant in a while. The New England's going to be probably picking at the 101 next year and the real NFL draft. I think they're probably going to have one of the top 3 picks. I think they're going to be not just bottom 10 offense, probably bottom 3. There's not a lot of options in the wide receiver room. Hunter Henry's good, but he's coming off an injury. So I think Ramondre is a volume play, but the ceiling's not very high there. I spoke about Chuba a little bit already. Chuba's going to start the year for at least 4 weeks. Hopefully he gets some touchdowns and can help Rudy in the first 4 weeks, but I do expect his role to diminish as the season goes on and Jonathan Brooks gets more healthy. I don't see that being a committee. I do see it as Brooks's backfield with Chuba kind of filling in there when necessary. And then Trey Benson, I love. James Conner has never played an entire NFL season. Trey Benson looked great in preseason. I have him all over my dynasty teams. I'm very high on Trey Benson, the prospect. On the weeks that I don't play Rudy, I'll be very excited to cheer for Trey Benson. And I really like what he could be if Conner, misses time, when he misses time. And again, I've mentioned Arizona's offense. I think Arizona, as a Niners fan, it sucks because Arizona, I really like what they're doing. But I think they have a really tremendous opportunity and upside. So I actually see Benson as possibly later in the season as the third option behind Etienne and Mixon in this running back room. At the wide receiver position, I like Drake London. I think the hard part with Garrett Wilson and Drake London and Chris Olave, Michael Pittman is in redraft. This is a keeper league, so some of the guys that I'm mentioning, weren't available at the 1-2 turn, the first, second round. These guys are all being drafted like they've been wide receiver ones because they're going inside the top 15 to 20 picks, and none of them have had a wide receiver 1 season before. So, Kyle Pitts is hurt already, did his hamstring, so that's more volume for Drake London and Bijan Robinson. But it's his best quarterback he's ever played with. But Kirk Cousins is 38 years old, coming off of a massive Achilles tear. So I like Drake London. I was skeptical this offseason when Cousins signed about Drake London to the moon. I think a wide receiver 1 season, a top 10 finish is within his range of outcomes. I don't project that. I think he finishes in the 12 to 15 range, but that's still a solid player to have there. Amari Cooper, Terry McLaurin, Jalen Waddle, Keon Coleman. What you believe about Deshaun Watson should determine what you believe about Amari Cooper. I think Joe Flacco was far and away the better player for the Cleveland Browns last year. He produced better fantasy results. He produced real, actual wins in the NFL. Watson has not been the player that he has been. Jerry Jeudy is there now. David Njoku was a league winner. Jerome Ford catches passes. So Cooper, to me, is a really safe volume play to be a wide receiver too. I think that's where he finishes. And then I like it with Drake London. Terry McLaurin is a riser in my book here over the last week because Jahan Dotson was traded. Like Cliff Kingsbury's offense, it should be a ton of volume for Terry McLaurin. He's never been a wide receiver one. I don't think he gets there with a rookie quarterback, but he's probably going to finish as a wide receiver two. And so you've got Rudy with Drake London, Amari Cooper, and Terry McLaurin with three guys who should finish inside the top 20. And that's great. I think that's really good. Jalen Waddle, you have seen him be a wide receiver one with Tyreek and Tua. He is kind of just has this injury that's just sort of lingering, but he's off the practice report. He's playing this week. In my opinion, Jalen Waddle is the best wide receiver on this roster. I think he is the only guy that I would project to finish as a wide receiver one, even with Tyreek there. We just love Miami's offense. I think it's one of the best offenses, if not the most explosive in the league. Nico Collins, obviously in the 15th, he's going to be locked and loaded in the lineup every week. Jacoby Myers, it depends what you believe about Vegas. Myers is not my favorite player. Gardner Minshew's kind of average. So I'm not super stoked on Myers, but he was relevant as a wide receiver 3 last season. And Keon Coleman has every opportunity to be the wide receiver 1 in Buffalo with Josh Allen. So I would set this team up for Rudy. I would play all the receivers at the flex positions. Obviously, you have to start 3 of them, but I would only play Etienne and Mixon, and then I would play the receivers. That's how I would set this team up. Again, I'm not a big fan of 2 tight ends. Trey McBride, I think, can be the tight end 1 overall this season. I think Andrews, Laporta, McBride, and Kincaid, those are the 4 guys that I realistically project as the opportunity to do it. Kelsey could, but we haven't seen it in a while. So I love Trey McBride. I think he is the wide receiver 2. I know he's a tight end, but he's the quote unquote wide receiver 2 in this offense, as an option for Kyler Murray. Even though I like Michael Wilson, I think McBride is the better player, and it should be Marvin Harrison Jr. leading the way in targets with Trey McBride second. So great pick there in the 4th round. I don't think you need Bowers. Rookie tight ends don't. I mean, Sam Laporta broke the mold last year. He broke the model. But he's also playing with Jared Goff on an incredible offense, and Bowers is playing on a bottom 10 team. So I think Rudy probably looks to either trade Bowers or to find a running back on the waiver wire and just kind of stick with McBride until bye weeks and figure it out from there. The running back room's not my favorite, but the quarterback, the tight end, and the wide receivers are all really great values in my book. So I do project Rudy in the top 6 right now. The man of the hour, the man with all the picks. 3 first-round picks. And Luke, I know we gave you a hard time last night, man. I appreciate you being a good sport. You knew that was coming with all of us there with giving you a raft of shit because you had all these great picks. Hard in the top 3 to screw it up. So let's start at the top here with Patrick Mahomes. I'm just not a fan of drafting a quarterback and single quarterback this early. You're missing out on too much value. So, Mahomes and Josh Allen in the 3rd round, Lamar Jackson in the 4th, I think is fine. But realistically, I don't want a quarterback on my team until the 5th round and single quarterback. You just, especially in a keeper league where you've got, all these guys that are already missing that should have been available to be drafted. With that said, it's Patrick Mahomes. It's as safe as it gets. It's the only player in the league that doesn't have to rush at all like Lamar Jackson does or like Anthony Richardson or like Jalen Hurts and can still be the overall QB1. So I don't like where he took Patrick Mahomes, but I love that he has him. So great pick. I'm not quite sure what happened here on the bottom, but I think it might have been an auto pick or the internet issues, but we got Jared Goff and Justin Herbert. I think Luke has already dropped both those guys, so Patrick Mahomes is the only guy right now, and that's great. At the running back position, look, Jahmyr Gibbs, one of the guys I think can be the overall RB1. I believe David Montgomery is a league winner, but if Monty misses time, Jahmyr Gibbs probably is the overall RB1 with the amount of volume and that offense. So I absolutely love the pick. at the 107 there. I think Luke nailed that pick. We were all giving him a hard time that he would mess his picks up. He did not miss on that pick. Great pick at 107 for Jahmyr Gibbs as your hero RB. And then the rest of the room's really thin. Achane is fantastic. He's a great RB2. I'm very comfortable with Achane as my RB2. In fact, every league that I have Achane, he is my RB2 or my RB3. I do not want him as my RB1. He misses time. He's in a timeshare. Raheem Mostert is still the starter. The difference is Achane can do in 18 touches what it's going to take Alvin Kamara and James Conner and Kenneth Walker to do in 30 touches. And that's the advantage of having Achane, is he doesn't have to have the snap share that all the other guys do, and he can still win you a week. So I love Achane. I think it's obviously a ceiling play. I'm really actually happy for Luke that he was able to keep him as a keeper this late, because players that are drafting Achane in the second round, that's not where you want to take him. It's just too expensive. It's too risky for me. And that's where he's being drafted. So obviously it's a free player as a keeper in the 15th. Tremendous compliment to Jahmyr Gibbs. And that's what Luke has on this roster. Zach Moss is the starter in Cincinnati, but I think it's going to be a timeshare with him and Chase Brown. It's kind of messy. I didn't understand the Bucky Irving pick in the 9th round. Realistically, you could have gotten Bucky probably in the last pick of the draft. He probably would have gone undrafted, in all honesty. So that one didn't make sense to me. But I like the player. And if Rachaad White misses any time, is a tremendous amount of value for Bucky. So it's a good player to have. I just didn't understand the pick when you could have got him 5-6 rounds or even got him off the waiver wire because you dropped Goff and Herbert. At the wide receiver spot, look, CeeDee Lamb was the wide receiver 1 last year. He's the only guy there. I'll get to Jake Ferguson in a minute, but it is CeeDee Lamb, and in the wide receiver room in Dallas, there's nobody else. Brandon Cooks is old. He's not what he was. There's just nobody else. Jalen Tolbert is there. That doesn't inspire me. So CeeDee Lamb has, I think, one of the best opportunities to repeat as the overall wide receiver 1 this season. If he does it, I wouldn't be surprised. I don't think he finishes anywhere below the top 5. I would not have taken Jamar Chase at the 108. I know it's not because of week 1. The amount of keepers in this league, with Greg having the majority of the running backs, I would have taken Saquon Barkley and just dominated the running back spot, because with all these other picks, Luke could have easily passed on Mahomes, still got a great quarterback later, and just loaded up at really great value at wide receiver in these middle rounds where he has these picks. But that's just me. With that said, you're never going to cry about having Jamar Chase as your wide receiver 2 behind CeeDee Lamb. That's the value of 3 first-round picks. So the caveat with Jamar Chase is, yes, it's possible I think he'll play this weekend personally, but it's possible he doesn't. I just think it's going to be a slow start, even if he does play. He hasn't practiced. He hasn't been in camp. I know he's fit, and I get that, but you guys, we were all college athletes. You know as well as I do that game fitness is very different than practice fitness. So, and he hasn't been practicing, which means he's just been doing running on his own. So I think Luke needs to just temper his expectations that Jamar Chase, is he capable of coming out of the gates hot? Of course, it's Jamar Chase. Of course, he's capable of blowing the top off in week 1 and winning you the week. Will he do that? I don't think so. I'm still going to start him, but it may not just be this, I'm going to crush everyone because I have I have Lamb and I have Chase and you guys can't compete. Maybe in week 4, but maybe not in week 1. Malik Neighbors, it's a volume play. I think it is a good pick. I again, in the 3rd round with some of the other guys that were on the board, I probably would have passed and taken some of the other guys that were there, but the volume is going to be there because in New York, it is just him. The downside is you're catching passes from Daniel Jones, which means, are you really catching passes from Daniel Jones? So I love Neighbors in Dynasty. I think he's got tremendous upside. It reminds me of OBJ. He's got a lot of the same qualities, same city, same college. I mean, everything is lined up for him to be a superstar in this league. I think Daniel Jones is going to hurt Malik Neighbors' value when he gets a better quarterback next year. Drafting Malik Neighbors in the 3rd round, all day, slam dunk. Steph Diggs is fine. Look, as your wide receiver 4, you're never going to be upset by that. But like the San Francisco players, like the Green Bay players, when it's not Stephon Diggs' week, it's not going to be good. It's probably going to be 4 to 6 points, and that's not going to help you win. When it is his week and he gets the touchdown and he gets 60 to 70 yards, that's fantastic. And that's what you want him in there for. So I love Diggs as a flex play on Luke's team here. I don't know that I love him as my wide receiver 3 every week. I think a flex play is the right decision. After the Diggs pick, I'll be honest, it's pretty thin. It's pretty thin. George Pickens is the only guy in Pittsburgh, but you've seen George Pickens. If you have a DFS lineup, if you're in playing, best ball's pretty much over. But if you had best ball this summer, I have a ton of George Pickens in best ball. I don't have to set my lineup. I don't have to worry about it. And the weeks that George Pickens goes and scores 40 fantasy points, which is his ceiling, he wins you the week. Russell Wilson's bad. Justin Fields is bad. Pittsburgh's offense is, who knows what it's going to look like with Arthur Smith. I think the volume is obviously going to go to Pickens. I just don't think the Steelers are going to be very good. And like I said, Pickens can go and get you 35 to 40 points, but he can also get you 3. And so you're going to live with a huge, huge range of outcomes. I like Calvin Ridley more than I like George Pickens this season. You know, the Titans paid him. Whether they should have paid him that much or not is a different story, but the Titans paid him. Will Levis is playing for his job and his life in the NFL. And honestly, I think Ridley's the guy. I think he's the wide receiver 1 in that team. I think wide receiver inside the top 20 is in Ridley's range of outcomes this year as a wide receiver 2. Khalil Shakir is an interesting dart throw. Someone has to emerge as the pass catcher in Buffalo. It could be Coleman. It could be Shakir. Curtis Samuel's hurt right now, but I like Khalil Shakir. I think he's a useful player. The ceiling's not very high, but the floor is, so that's good. He's pretty safe. And then Jalen Polk is, I said Ramondre was the only player in New England that I would take. Jalen Polk, someone has to emerge in New England as the pass catcher. Jacoby Brissett, and when it becomes Drake May, they have to throw it to someone. I think they will throw it to Jalen Polk. He's the best player on the team, talent-wise. And ultimately, I think he's going to get the majority of the snap share as well as the targets. I just don't think the ceiling's very high because the team's not very good. I don't think there's going to be a lot of touchdowns. So obviously with the ceiling that Kyle Pitts and Dallas Goedert, look, Pitts is hurt and that's not good. You know, a hamstring 3 days before the start of the regular season is not what you want to hear, especially when we've never seen him produce at where he's been drafted. And Dallas Goedert is coming off an oblique injury. The Eagles just traded for Jahan Dotson. So now you've got Saquon Barkley with a rushing quarterback in Jalen Hurts, A.J. Brown and Devonta Smith, both of whom are capable of being wide receiver 1s. And we've seen them finish inside the top 10 in the same season with Jalen Hurts. Goddard's the odd man out. So I don't like Luke's tight end room. But the ceiling, obviously, with Mahomes, Lamb, Gibbs, Chase, Achane, Neighbors, and Diggs, Luke's in the top 6. There's no doubt. All right, running a little bit longer, but we're getting there. Mr. Robertini, I like this group. Again, really quickly, Jonathan Taylor is not on this team. Isaiah Pacheco is. So, Robs, let's just start in the running back room. Isaiah Pacheco and James Cook, I think both can finish inside the top 10. Great value at the 4th and 5th round for keepers. Easily your RB1 and RB2. I don't think you have to even worry about it. So you just put the 2 of them in there and you just move on. I have Joe Burrow as a league winner this year. I know he doesn't rush. He is a pocket passer, but if Jamar Chase can play this week, great. When Jamar Chase gets up to speed and his usual self with T. Higgins, with Yeshovas, and then obviously with Jermaine Burton, I think Cincinnati is a playoff team. I think they finished 2nd in this division behind the Ravens. Sorry, my brain went blank there. Behind the Ravens, I think it's the Ravens 1 and Cincinnati 2. And I think Joe Burrow is going to have a fantastic season. He is plus 250 to be the comeback player of the year, making him the number 1 odds betting favorite for that award. Let's start at wide receiver here. Marvin Harrison Jr. It's a rookie, but it maybe is the best rookie we've seen since Jamar Chase and Justin Jefferson. I think he has every opportunity to be rookie of the year. I think he probably is more likely to be offensive player of the year, offensive rookie of the year than the overall rookie of the year. That'll probably go to Caleb Williams. But the volume is there. Kyler's a good quarterback. It's an offense we are really excited about. And so I think the risk is you haven't seen it. The reward is everything we know and the metrics and the data and all the signs point to he's going to return on his value. So I think it's a safe pick, and I love the upside there for Rob. Brandon Ayuk should be the happiest man in San Francisco. He got his contract. It's massive for the Niners to bring him back. Niners, obviously one of the top offenses in football. I've said it twice already. I'll say it one final time. When it's Brandon Ayuk's week, he can win you a week. When it's George Kittle or Debo's week, Brandon Ayuk suffers. And that's just the variance you have to live with when you've got teams like the Niners, the Packers, the Texans. Rome Odunze, I love him in Dynasty. I've got him everywhere in Dynasty. He's going to be fantastic. Eventually, him and Caleb, I think, could be one of those, Burrow Chase type players once they both eventually get their second contracts. I think he overtakes Keenan Allen this season. I don't think it happens for a couple weeks, but I think he's a rookie. He's got to learn. DJ Moore's there. Caleb's a rookie, but I do see a path where Rome Odunze finishes ahead of Keenan Allen this season, and I think could very easily slot in here as the wide receiver 3 or the flex play for Rob's team. Xavier Worthy is not a player that I'm particularly excited about this in Dynasty. I know this is a redraft league, keeper league, but to me, he's a deep threat. He's a great best ball player. He's a guy that you don't want to have to worry about. So I think Worthy, what he's going to do, and he'll probably do it tonight, he'll catch a bomb, and that's what you want. The problem is you can't count on him catching a bomb, 60-yard touchdown from Mahomes every single week. So his route tree is okay. It's not great. And he's 100 guys. He's 165 pounds. If you've seen the camp videos, he's getting pushed around by his own teammates like a freaking pinball. So I think he's going to struggle with press coverage. I think he's going to struggle underneath, and going across the middle is not where you want him. So I'm not going to call him a gadget guy, because he's not. He is a better route runner than a gadget guy, but he's just going to be streaky. You know what I mean? He's going to be kind of a George Pickens light. He can get you 25, 30 points on a week when he catches, 5 for 128 and 2. That's his stat line. That wins you the week. Problem is the next week he'll turn around and go 3 for 26. So I think he's a flex play for Rob. He's a huge, huge upside flex play. So I love that. I just think it's hard for consistency to bet on him every single week. Chris Godwin, I'm very high on this season, and I'm not very high on the Buccaneers this year. I think the Falcons win that division, and the Bucs are, if they make the playoffs, it'll be as a wild card team. But I'm Dave Canales leaving upsets me, because he's such a good offensive coordinator and now a head coach. But I love Chris Godwin moving back to the slot. Every year that Chris Godwin has played in the slot has been his best, most productive years for fantasy. That's where they're playing him. I really like Jalen McMillan in this team. He's a rookie. So it is Mike Evans and Chris Godwin until further notice. Baker's back for another year. Rashad White's back for another year. Offensive line looks okay. So I like Chris Godwin. I would play this team Harrison, Ayuk, Godwin as my 3 receivers, and then I would flex Rome, and I would probably flex Worthy. AD Mitchell, I'm very high on. I think he'll start slow, but I like the player in Indianapolis. He ran 4.33 at the combine and was 0.02 slower than Xavier Worthy, and he's 30 pounds heavier. Give me AD Mitchell all day with Anthony Richardson, who's got a massive arm. AD Mitchell can take the top off of defense, and he can catch big, long touchdowns as well. So I like this wide receiver room for Rob. The challenge for Rob is that the running backs are really thin. Ty Chandler and Tyler Algier are both backups, even though they're very high-value backups. Ty Chandler, I think, is going to have more standalone value because he'll play even when Aaron Jones is healthy. Obviously, if and when Jones misses time, Chandler becomes the guy. And Algier is probably the best backup handcuff in the NFL. We saw him rush for 1,000 yards his, almost said freshman, his rookie season. And obviously, if Bijan misses time, Algier is certainly capable of carrying that workload. It's just a really thin running back room. Jake Ferguson, league winner. I love Jake Ferguson. He is the second pass catching option. He had 102 targets last year. Brandon Cooks had 81. I mentioned it. It's CeeDee Lamb and no one else. Jake Ferguson is the wide receiver 2. He's a tight end, but he's the wide receiver 2 on that team. Jake Ferguson is my sleeper pick to finish inside the top 5 while being drafted outside the top 5 at the tight end position. And I told Rob last night, I'll say it again, I would drop Cade Otton and go find a running back. As much as I like the pieces in this team this season, and I have some guys that I do think are league winners, This running back room is too thin for me, and the wide receiver room is very top heavy and very streaky. So I don't currently have Rob in my top 6 making a playoff appearance. The man, the myth, the legend, the Godfather, Hova. Let's finish with Tim's team here. Tua Tagovailoa and Brock Purdy in the 15th round. I like the Tua pick. Again, not a huge fan of 2 quarterbacks. I think Brock Purdy is a pretty safe quarterback 1. He's not a game manager. He's a good player. He's a good football player. The hard part for me with Brock Purdy with Tua is I think I would still play Purdy every week. I think he has the better offense. I know Miami's got a great offense and super explosive. So maybe it's matchup dependent, but I think it's more of a headache than anything else of like, who do you want to play? I would have just gone with one quarterback and said Purdy was the guy, but it's fine. They've both got relatively early bye weeks, so Hova has time to figure it out. At the running back position, Tim has my running back 5 in Saquon Barkley. I have him as the 5th running back right now. I think this is going to be his best, most productive season. He has the best offensive line he's ever run behind. He's going to have the ability to have Jalen Hurts take some of the pressure off of him. He's got A.J. Brown, Devonta Smith to take the top off of a defense to open up the running lanes. Philly's going to be really good. And I think after last season when they struggled and had such an embarrassing downfall the second half of the year, they're motivated, they're hungry. Their division is terrible. The division it's between them and the Cowboys to win the division. I do have the Eagles winning that league. I think Saquon Barkley as a hero RB is your plug and play RB1 every single week with massive touchdown upside. Saquon Barkley can finish as the overall RB1. Love that pick. Great value for the last pick of the first round. David Montgomery, I've already said it. League winner. If Gibbs misses time, it's Monty's backfield. If Monty misses time, Gibbs can be the overall RB1. Monty finishes RB18 last year. I think he probably finishes as a pretty high RB2 again. I see him and Jahmyr Gibbs coexisting. They can both play. Gibbs gets motioned out of the back. He plays in the slot. Monty's in the backfield. He's the goal line guy because he's bigger and heavier. I love that with Saquon Barkley and Monty as my RB1 and 2. It's an awesome running back room. Mostert obviously was 18 rushing touchdowns last season, overall RB2 on the year. 18 rushing touchdowns is not sustainable. There will be touchdown regression, but I do think he can flirt with double digits again. He's still the starter, so it is very possible that he gets to 9-10 touchdowns, even if the volume comes down and gets spread with Achane. I think Jaylen Warren's the better running back in Pittsburgh over Najee Harris. The Steelers declined Najee's 5th-year option. They are likely to pay Warren. The downside for Warren right now is he's coming off the hamstring, but the best pick of the draft, in my opinion, at the 801 was Jerome Ford. Ford is going to be an absolute nightmare for teams in Cleveland. They have a top 5 offensive line. He has been very, very productive behind that offensive line in the past. I think he keeps his job when Nick Chubb returns, and I think they form more of a committee. But Ford is the guy for a while, and he should start really fast. Jalen Wright, awesome to have Mostert and Wright. I'm not usually a fan of taking handcuffs, but in this case, I'm okay with it because you can't get Achane. He was a keeper, but you wouldn't have been able to draft him, and also Mostert. So I like it. If anything happens to Mostert and Achane, Wright becomes very relevant, and Achane and Mostert have a history of missing games. So good, really good running back room. At the wide receiver position, DK Metcalf, Michael Pittman, Deontay Johnson, keeper of Jamison Williams and Curtis Samuel. There isn't a wide receiver 1 on this team, and that is okay. It's not ideal, but Metcalf is touchdown dependent to get to a wide receiver 1. If DK Metcalf can get to 8+ touchdowns with 1,100 yards, he can finish inside the top 10. I don't know if he's going to get there. It's a lot of what ifs with a new offense, new offensive coordinator, team that wants to run the ball. Geno's older, so it's going to be a question mark for me, but it's still a great wide receiver 1 to have. Michael Pittman's a great player. I love Michael Pittman. The downside of Michael Pittman is that he doesn't score touchdowns. The upside of Michael Pittman is he gets all the yardage. He's the wide receiver 1 there. So similar to DK, if he can up his touchdown numbers, I think it's a really good season for him. But it hasn't happened yet, so we'll have to see it. Deontay Johnson's going to get everything in Carolina. He should soak up as many targets as they can possibly give him. But what is Bryce Young? And that's the biggest question for me. I like Deontay Johnson as the wide receiver 3 on this team. I think he's going to get a lot of volume. I just don't know how many touchdowns are going to come from that because I just don't project Carolina to be very good. Jameson Williams is like a very close comp to George Pickens. He's been hurt a lot. When he is healthy, he's great. We saw what he did in the playoffs. He can take the top off of defense and burn you for a 60, 70, 80-yard touchdown. The problem is with Jameson Williams is his availability isn't always there because he's hurt. And when he is healthy, there's so many other guys in Detroit. So I love Jameson Williams. I'm not quite buying the uber super breakout season. I think if he stays healthy, he can finish inside the top 30 players at the position. But I just don't see with the other guys there enough volume to get him inside the top 20. Curtis Samuel, like I said, someone's got to emerge in Buffalo. Curtis Samuel's interesting. He is also in a crowded room and coming off an injury. But for this team as the wide receiver 5, I think it's fine. And then Travis Kelce is always going to be Mahomes' guy. I don't think he repeats as the tight end 1. I think his tight end 1 days are behind him. I think this is his last contract. But who are you throwing the ball to in the red zone? Travis Kelce. So Travis Kelce, just like George Kittle, the weeks that he gets you 60 yards and 3 touchdowns, Kelce wins you the week. The week when, they throw a touchdown to Rashee Rice and Pacheco runs one in, and Kelce's role is just kind of diminished from the touchdowns and he only gets, 60 yards. It's tough, when you've drafted him in the second, your second pick, but he's still going to finish safely inside the top 5 at the position. So I like this running back room a lot. I don't love this receiver room. I do have Tim in the top 6, but it's close. And so now that I've gone through the league, I will reveal Luke, Phil, Stan, Greg, Rudy, Hova, and Colin is teetering for me. So I have 7 guys for 6 spots. I just don't like Colin's running back room. I think it's too thin over the life of a season. Now, look, this is a redraft league. We're going to trade players. We're going to pick guys up the waiver wire. Someone's going to emerge. It happens every year. So what I'm saying is based off of how we've drafted our teams today. It's not, oh, well, you said that I wouldn't win, and all of a sudden I won the league. Well, sure, your team could look very different in 6 weeks. So as of today, I think the games between Rudy, Hova, and Colin determine who gets the 6th spot. And I would project Rudy and Hova in those top 6. So my top 4, as it stands today, I think Luke, Phil, Stan, and Greg will make the playoffs with Rudy and Hova very, very close. And if Rudy and Hova can beat Stan and Greg, I think they have a really good chance to disrupt that order. So realistically, that's why I have a top 6. I think any of those top 6 guys could finish inside of the top 4 and make the playoffs. Like I said, guys, that's the show today. If you want me to do kind of a breakdown of, where did you maybe, could you have pivoted? Where's a guy maybe you could have taken that you didn't, or roster construction? If you care enough, I'm more than happy to do it. If you don't, hope you have an awesome season. I hope you've enjoyed this league breakdown and season preview. I'm stoked to watch football tonight. And if I can do more recordings for us during the season, maybe a weekly matchup preview or something to that effect and add them to the podcast, I always will. Thanks for tuning in, guys. Love y'all. Look forward to competing against you and having another awesome fantasy football season.